What is up, GOAT World? It is me, your boy JDZ, and I'm back at you again with another GOAT format video. Today we got another top 10, and the top 10 we're discussing today are going to be top 10 neg ones in GOAT format. But before I get into the video, for those that may ask or those that may not know, I'll quickly explain what a neg one is. So in GOAT format, you have cards that can go +1. These cards add an extra card to your hand or take one card away from your opponent. You also have cards that are 1 for 1, cards that will exchange with your opponent 1 card for 1 card. And you also have the dreaded neg 1, cards that will use their effect and won't be able to exchange that card for one of your opponent's cards. In GOAT format, card advantage is extremely important. So you want to make sure when you're making your deck, you're not including too many neg 1s, or you're going to be having a lot of neg wins. So for this video, I'm not going to include too many cards that discard as cost or tribute from the field, because those cards can easily be manipulated, and most often they'll break even, and in some cases they will even go plus. So with all that out of the way, we're hopping in to the top 10 neg ones in GOAT format. And this list was actually kind of easy. They're all kind of difficult, but this one was a little bit easy. It was pretty much cut and dry, because you guys know what the neg ones are. Starting at number 10, I'm putting my own personal favorite neg 1. I'm putting Ceasefire at number 10. This card is tragically underplayed as well, because it is a neg 1. All these cards are not going to be played as much as they probably could be because of their position as neg 1s. But this one is really cool because turbo is all over the place. Everyone has flip effect monsters. A lot of people are playing Solemn Judgment. This card can win games, especially if you're playing in timed rounds, timed events. This card can literally steal games from people, and it's just not played because it is a inherent neg 1. Back in the day, I do remember when this card came out, Feral Servant, as an ultra rare, it was highly played, highly coveted. It's basically a staple, but now it's kind of removed from the game for the most part. You might see it come up every now and then, but this thing can be chained. It's chainable, so you can kind of go 1 for 1 sometimes when they hit MST or they go Regeki Break on your back row for whatever reason. You chain Ceasefire and you do a little bit of burn damage, and you can kind of get a hidden value when you are able to negate your opponent's flip effects and do a little bit of damage on top of that. In this video, I'm not going to add too many burn cards to this thing too, because I could just have burn cards in here all day long. So I really don't want to do that, but I did want to include this one because it is very iconic and it is a neg 1, and I do believe this card is still very playable in GOAT format. Okay, moving on to number 9. I'm bringing in the Book of Taiyu. The Book of Taiyu is going to be in that number 9 position. This card is super duper playable, very underexplored Yu-Gi-Oh card right here because of its -1 capacity, especially in a competitive setting. When you see a card and you just read the effect and it doesn't plus, in fact it negs, you kind of immediately just dump it right to the side. But I think this card is super cool because you can play it on your own monsters to just cheat your flip effects out even sooner, or you can play it on your opponent's monster and you can put that thing into attack position and then blast off on it with a beefy attack. I think this card is a sleeper in the meta as well. I think it can be worked into some other decks. Empty Jar plays this card very vigorously. The Ron control stuff can play it, and I can see what it can do when you pair it with Cyber Jar, Morphin Jar, things of that sort. It can just kind of get out of hand sometimes. I think Book of Taiyu is a sleeper. It is a neg 1, but it is still pretty cool when used in the correct capacity. All right, moving on to number 8. Number 8, I have another one of my favorite neg 1s, a card. I'm actually going to make a video about this card pretty soon. The card I'm talking about is going to be Interdimensional Matter Transporter. This is a neg 1, and I remember when this card came out, oh my goodness, you talk about Dark Crisis. Okay, you talk about your boy JDZ. Whenever I see one of them Dark Crisis ultra rare come in there, I just light up because I love Dark Crisis, and I think this card was super cool. And I played this card so hard back in the day. I thought it was good. I still think it's good. I still think it's super playable because if you use it in the right capacity, you can chain it and you can move your fusion monster, your Thousand Eyes Restrict specifically, move it out of play, and it can come back and get another high quality suck. Your Fusilier Dual Mode Beast, you got it at 14, move it out of play, it comes back at 28. There you go. They go Snatch Steal, you go Interdimensional Matter Transporter. You just went 1 for 1 there. So you turn that neg into something of value. This card kind of sucks though. It really does. It's not the best card, because when you're top decking late or you need some type of defense and then you're kind of double negging yourself at a certain point. In certain scenarios you can, because you have to play this and then you get rid of your so it's a neg 2 sometimes, so it's really bad, but it's also really good. You know what I'm saying? I like me some Interdimensional Matter Transporter. I think this card is playable and is really cool when you can pop off with it. Okay, especially when you got like King Dragoon in the mix. King Dragoon, they go Tribe, pitch to discard, you play Interdimensional Matter Transporter, it comes back in end phase and your opponent will be in shambles 100% of the time. Super cool card. I think it's super groovy. It is a neg 1 and it's also quite terrible. Anyway, moving on to number 7. Number 7, I'm putting Threatening Roar. Okay, I'm a believer. I'm buying my Threatening Roar stock. It's at an all-time low, and I think you can pick it up for relatively cheap. It is a neg 1, but it can actually save your life. And I think cards that can save your life, you might want to think about trying to utilize those cards, man. You might want to utilize the cards, especially with Reasoning Gate coming back in. And they do have a secret rare printing that I didn't know about. I just got some. So I'm gonna start playing Threatening Roar, especially if you find yourself playing like a lot of Monarch type decks or type like Tribute style decks, and you just need to, and you got that Sinister Serpent in rotation. You guys know what I'm talking about. You've all been there. You set Sinister Serpent and they're just running you down. Well, if you have a set Sinister Serpent, you play Threatening Roar, you're allowed to then summon the Monarch on top of the Sinister Serpent, and you're getting your value right back, baby. And it's all coming together. It's all coming together. You know, these are the lines you got to think about. You got to think outside the box to make these neg 1s work. But still, it is a neg 1. It's still kind of neat. Artwork is pretty fire, so I would definitely consider trying to work Threatening Roar in. It is a number 7 best neg 1. Okay, moving into number 6. Number 6, I have probably everyone's all-time favorite neg 1. You know it, you love it. It's going to be the Magic Cylinder. This is the second burn type card I have on here. Again, I didn't want to include too many burn cards on here, or we'll just take up the whole list. But Magic Cylinder is too iconic to not talk about in that neg 1 variety. Just like Ceasefire, Magic Cylinder was played so heavily back in the day at that Secret Rare and Labyrinth Nightmare. You just had to have it, you had to play it, and this thing can win. This thing can win games. People just don't think about this card all the time. And I'm telling you, at least once a week when I'm playing on the ladder or playing wherever, I'm getting blasted by a Magic Cylinder for a game, and it will just absolutely send you right to Shambletown. So I had to put it in there as a neg 1 because it is a neg 1. It can stop that attack, so it can protect a monster in a pinch. So if you want to count that as some type of a 1-for-1, then you can, but I still think it's a super duper neg 1, but you can send your opponent some of that damage, and it counts for something. So I think the card's pretty good. Okay, moving on, we are in the top 5 now. The top 5, stay alive, like and subscribe for the top 5. As we're moving on to the top 5 neg 1s, it's going to be Compulsory Evacuation Device, CED. This card is super duper playable as well, especially with the goats kind of rotating back into formation. You can get the Thousand Eyes Restrict off the field. With the zombies rotating back in, you can get the Ryokoki back to hand. Vampire Lord, back to hand. Sacred Phoenix, back to hand. All the Rogue and Rapscallion decks, this can just send all that stuff back to hand. And it's chainable. Chainable cards are really cool because they're neg 1s, yes, but then when you can get those things on the end of a chain, you're typically going 1-for-1, and you can kind of sometimes get a pseudo plus when you're chaining it in the right scenario. They go MST, you chain Compulse, they lost the MST, and they lost their tribute monster back to hand, or their beefy summon, or their chaos monster they can't put back down, back to hand, or their flip monster that you just denied. They can't, flip it and get a plus on you. So I think it's a cool card. It's not the best card in this meta because it's not that great against Turbo. Specifically, all these cards, reason why they're so bad is because they're not directly good against Chaos Turbo. But still, I think in certain scenarios, this card can be playable in certain decks as a neg 1. Moving on to number 4, I'm putting Mind Control. And I didn't really want to put this card on the list as a neg 1. It can go 1-for-1. I mean, most of the time it will be going 1-for-1, especially when you're taking a Chaos Mon and you're using this effect to banish itself. Especially when you're taking a set Magician of Faith and getting a Pot of Greed back, it can go like +2 sometimes, or at least +1, I guess. When you're taking a Dekoichi and getting a plus, it goes 1-for-1. But sometimes this bad boy is taking Sangans, it's taking Serpents, it's taking Set Tribes, it's taking whatever, and this thing is negging super duper hard. So I had to put it on this list, but I put it very high on this list because I think it is a super good card still. It's still very played, it's still a very good card in the metagame. It's good against Chaos Turbo, just like I mentioned the other cards weren't. This one is actually very good against Chaos Turbo. I think it's so much so, I think this card is actually main deckable in some strategies, especially like the aggressive decks. If you're playing spies as well, put it in your main deck, man. You'll get more value from it than you will in the side deck these days. But still had to put it as a neg 1 because I've Mindcon too many Sangans, I've Mindcon too many Serpents, I've Mindcon too many, GK spies when I'm not playing spy, and it's just a neg at the end of the day. So I had to put it up here, still very high on the neg list. Okay, moving into the top 3. Top 3, number 3. I put Card Destruction here. I just put this in here. This card really doesn't belong on this list at all. I just put it in here because I do want to illuminate the fact that this card is at its core a neg 1. But just like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this video, typically when you're playing Card Destruction, you're going to have ways to manipulate that neg 1 effect and turn it into a plus, and sometimes a blowout card. So I had to mention Card Destruction on the list super duper high. Technically, it should be the number 1 neg 1, but it probably also shouldn't be on this list at all because there are other cards that you can kind of manipulate, and this card is one of those. I just had to put it on this list because there are times when you don't have the ability to do that, and this card is a super neg 1. You're just playing it. and you're losing a card, and you're going to send 2, and then you draw 2 more. So I did feature this card on here. It's super broken. Some people consider this card like one of the 4 pieces of the Trinity, but I had to put it up here as a neg 1 because technically it is still a super duper neg 1. Still probably one of the better end of the neg 1s. At number 2, Swords of Revealing Light. This card's good. This card's good. People might hate me for putting this one on here. But I think I've seen enough. I've watched enough streams. I stream all the time. There's going to be a stream this weekend, FLC going down. And I'm telling you, when it hits, man, it hits so hard. It hits so hard. And this thing will just save the game, allow that turbo deck to draw like 3 more cards, and then they're just absolutely back cooking, man, when they could absolutely be losing the game. So I had to put Swords up here super high as number 2 because this card is extremely playable. In fact, it's like a staple in most side decks. Well, it was for a time. I think it's kind of reducing its use, but I still think this card is extremely playable. It's good against the Reasoning Gate stuff. It's good against the aggressive stuff, Earth aggro warriors. It's good against the rogue and random. It's just a good card to have in your side deck. Maybe not main deckable yet, but in your side deck, bringing out the Swords of Revealing Light just to slow your opponent down for those 3 turns could be the difference between winning and losing. Okay, but before we get into the number 1 neg 1, the neg 1 of all, the number neggest of neg 1s, I'm gonna bring up some of the also rans like I typically do in my top 10 series. Some of the also rans I wanted to mention is going to be the card Cold Wave. I think Cold Wave is great. I think it's cool. It's not as good as the other ones, so I had to put it off the list as an also ran because it's very linear on its approach. You know what I'm saying? It can do the one thing. The one thing it can do is very, very good. But it can only do that one thing in GOAT format. This thing is at 3, and it does get limited, I believe banned subsequently after, but I think it's just not good enough to be featured in the top 10. Still super duper solid card. It can just win games as well when you pair it with Cyberstein and other things, and just kind of jam your opponent up. So Cold Wave, I had to mention that. Another one I want to talk about, and I didn't want to bring this one up either because of the same reason of mind control and even card destruction, is that most times when you play this card, you're going to be able to translate that neg 1 into some type of value, or you're going to be able to take a monster and do attack over. But there are some instances where all you can do is take it and then attack and then have to give it back. So technically this card is a neg 1 in those really, really rare instances, but still I had to at least mention it, and I didn't want to include that on the list for those reasons, because usually you take their guy and you tribute it, and technically I feel that's a 1. I don't know the damn math, you guys help me out, but I think that's still a 1 for 1 or so, but still it's pretty decent as a neg 1. Another one, we have another burn card I'm going to talk about. It's going to be Wave Motion Cannon. I want to put this card in here because I think this card is also a really, really strong Yu-Gi-Oh card that is not played in GOAT format at all. This card has game winning potential. Solemn Judgments are played at a high level in this format. Guess what? They play Solemn, you play Wave Motion. If they've already gone through their heavy MST breaker, you know, a Dust Tornado, then this thing is going to stick around. Like it's not going to leave the field. A late game Wave Motion Cannon is a game ending card, and it is just literally just not played at all. And I don't know why. It is a neg 1. That's probably why, because you have to play it, you have to wait, you have to play it, you have to wait, and then hopefully it goes off for at least 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 damage. But theoretically, it could sit there for 8 turns and you can just win the game with this one card. So I think that's pretty neat, but it's still a neg 1, and I had to put it on this list. Another one I think is another underplayed card. We're going to talk about Soul Release. I think this card is a neg 1, but it does have hidden potential to jack up your opponent's graveyard, to jack up your own graveyard to fuel return plays. So it's a neg, but it can turn into a positive later on in the game as they're not able to summon their chaos monsters on you and get further pluses that way. I think the card's cool, very playable, very cool, very playable. And the last one I want to mention is going to be Desert Sunlight. This card is up next. I think it's a super good card. I think I've seen Chaos Turbo players playing this card. I've seen other duelists using this card, other decks and things of that sort, just because it can set and get your flips going earlier, and then those flips can turn into generated pluses later on in the game. You know, you set a Morphing Jar, set Desert Sunlight, set your whole hand, pass it over to your opponent, they draw, you Desert Sun, you just neg them, and you plus yourself infinite. So I think that's a super cool card, very slept on card, not played that often, and I had to include it on this list. Okay, so coming in at number 1. At number 1, it's no surprise, it's going to be Book of Moon. Book of Moon, in my opinion anyway, is going to be the number 1 neg 1 in GOAT format because this card is so versatile, it's so slept on, it's so underplayed, it's so underutilized, it's so good because it can protect against Snatch Steal. It can protect against death. You know, they got they got Royal Decree on you, and they're just opening the floodgates and attacking. Well, you can flip Book of Moon, put their guy face down. You can snatch their guy, play Book of Moon, keep it forever. You know, it has so many utilities, protecting your chaos monsters, protecting your big guys, having a nice strong push, and you're ready to go in to end the game backed up by a Book of Moon. It's a very comfortable feeling. You got BLS on the field, and you got Book of Moon down, you're feeling super safe because it's really not a lot they're going to be able to do to get around it. They got their Snatch Steal, you got the protection for it. You know, I think that's a cool card, man. It's not played again because all these cards I mentioned before, they're not the greatest against Chaos Turbo. So Book of Moon is going to fall into that category as well. It's not good against Chaos Turbo, so that's why it's not played. But it used to be played a lot, and when goats were around, and goats are starting to come back a little bit, it's very good against goats. So think about Book of Moon as your #1 neg 1, and I think this list is secure. I think this list is really good. I really nailed it on this one. But as always, duelists, get down into the comment section and let me know what you think is the best neg 1 in GOAT format. And as always, I always leave cards off the list. Get into the comment section and let me know what I left off. Well, duelists, that's all I have. Until next time, I'm JDZ. I play GOATs. Shout out to the real ones. Salute to the OGs. Neg 1. Peace.